So, no matter who you are, no matter where you are on your spiritual journey, you are celebrated here. So let's begin in silence. Our silence is a way that we bring to mind our intention, that we want to stay aware that we live inside the heart of sacred mystery, and that paradoxically this sacred mystery lives in us and wants to find expression through how we live. So if it's helpful to close your eyes, you can do that. Take a deep breath. Decide to be here and not somewhere else. And may grace be in our heads and in our thinking. May grace be in our eyes and in our seeing. May grace be in our ears and in our hearing. May grace be in the mouth of Holly and me today as we speak. May grace be in our hearts and in our understanding. And may grace be at our ends and at our departing. And may this grace empower us to be who we are intended to be. And may what happens in this space contribute to the well-being of all people everywhere. Amen. So I have to get back to where I need to be. Okay. I forgot to put that up, but you know that.
It's okay.
All right.
Yeah.
So this time today is really an example of the teaching from the Jesus narrative that we're going to be using to teach from. So I decided some time ago to teach through one of the narratives that we have of Jesus. This is the one that was created by the linguistic scholar Stephen Mitchell. Stephen Mitchell has done a lot of translations of ancient Eastern text, and you can look him and his credentials up on ChatGPT or Google or whatever you trust. So this is just a way to follow in going through the teachings of Jesus. Some time ago, I took a phrase from the writings of Meister Eckhart to give a theme, overall theme to this journey called the Wayless Way. So that again kind of incorporates the non-dual aspect. It's a way that is wayless. And years ago, I had as a general theme for ordinary life for a long time a phrase that I got from Robert Johnson, which is called a journey into wholeness. And it was impossible for me to think about this text that we're dealing with today without thinking of Sarah Grant's work. Sarah Grant was a Roman Catholic nun who lived in Scotland, who went to India to study the Christian faith through the lens of Hinduism. And Sarah Grant is the one who wrote, "It isn't the way because Jesus followed it. Jesus followed it because it is the way." And I'm sure you are aware that in the early days of the Jesus movement, the people who were in that movement were not called Christians, they were simply called followers of the way. So all of that is to introduce this text that we are going to have a conversation about. And the text is, "Enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to suffering. And those who go through it are many. But the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to true life, and those who find it are few." Now, this is the way that Eugene Peterson translates this same passage. "Don't look for shortcuts to God. The market is flooded with surefire, easygoing formulas for a successful life that can be practiced in your spare time. Don't fall for that stuff. even though crowds of people do. The way to life, to God, is vigorous and requires total attention.
As you're talking, I'm thinking about the wayless way, and it's not called the wayless way because there isn't a map. I think of it like, and yes, of course, I have a Harry Potter reference, but in Harry Potter, there's something called the Marauder's Map, and it changes every time they open it. So there's sort of this way that's also wayless. There's directions, but there's not a single path. And it changes before our eyes. So I also want to acknowledge that it can feel hard to talk about these things, especially what does it mean to be on the wayless way from a mystical perspective without self-referencing and sometimes sounding self-aggrandizing. The narrow, so that we're sitting.
I never have a problem.
Never,
with
you
that.
never have a problem with that. Yeah. So if we're saying that the narrow gate is this journey toward the self, and the self is truly the only thing we really have any authority on, then our ways of talking about it have to also come from that space. And hopefully we find some resonance. But everything else we're just kind of pointing at. You know, that saying, the finger, don't mistake the finger pointing at the moon for the moon itself. Here we are. I'm saying, as a head type, a 6 on the Enneagram, and someone who learns by taking it in through the intellect and the mind, that's often my starting place, and it has to kind of work its way down into the heart and the body. I had this conversation with my own spiritual director the other day about how this veil sort of seems to be faltering or thinning between the spiritual and the physical worlds for me. So this week, for example, I have this electric gate, you know, those LiftMaster gates that you press, you know, you have it broke. I just think it's funny that it broke during the week that we're talking about gates. And last night yeah.
It's just hilarious.
Yeah. It is funny. It's like, of course it did. And last night I had a dream of literally walking through a gate with an older man friend of mine. These things are so this kind of way that the conscious mind is speaking to the unconscious. It's funny. And dream life seems to be talking to waking life a little more for me. These little magical moments are happening in spaces like, I don't know, youth basketball gyms, or I found myself sandwiched between my two of my giant teenage boys who they just wanted to snuggle the other day. And I'm like, what? When does this happen anymore? Of course, the next day they went right back to being kind of like, Mom, ugh. But these moments of alignment happen all the time. And the more I notice, the more I notice. So I'm thinking of the narrow gate like that. When life kind of comes into focus, when where you are is exactly where you need to be. There's nowhere else, no one else we can be. In Buddhism, it's called flow. My anxious mind is like, oh God, when will this end? What am I doing? What am I missing? You know, my anxious mind is constantly chattering. But the sober mind goes, okay, this is happening right now. Here we are. And it's beautiful. And it's sometimes terrible. If someone were to come and ask me right now about the way, that's what I would say. It's beautiful and it's terrible, and that's the tension that we have to hold. But it's also just right here.
So one of the things that I would say in response to that is that the way is determined also by the terrain, and the terrain can change. Mm-hmm. Because the terrain is built on these plates that shift occasionally, and these seismic shifts that cause earthquakes. Yeah. And you lose your job or get a cancer diagnosis or whatever it is, and the terrain can affect. Yeah. But the way is still the way.
Yeah. The only way is through.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah. I just think everything that happens in the natural world happens in us too. You literally talked about seismic shifts, and that's happening all the time. Mm-hmm.
We're part of everything.
Yeah, so we're already part of that, and so it happens in us too. Yeah.
So here's one of the things I thought about when I first read this text. And I don't get this as much as I used to. And there are a variety of reasons for that. I think is that people self-select who come to Ordinary Life. They now kind of know what they're getting in for.
Yeah.
But for a while, people didn't. And I think some of the things that I taught caused people to raise questions about what they had considered to be their Christianity. And so they quote the passage where Jesus says in John, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one gets through the gate or comes to the Father except through me.
Yeah.
And what that made me think of was an article that was in the New York Times this week. And the New York Times editorial raised the question, is Texas ready for the religion of James Tallarico?
Yeah.
Now that's a really serious question. Because if you're talking about the religion of Texas, majority of people I'm speaking of, and we'll talk about this group, this demographic in a minute, but the majority of people who would take the Gospel of John as a literal document, where it's only Jesus and no other way, then Texas is not ready for the religion of James Tallarico.
Yeah, it's funny. So I was just having a tiny little discussion with John Howard before this about the difference between pastoral and prophetic. And it just like that phrase I don't think ever left my mouth. Like, oh, there's a big difference between being pastoral and prophetic. And Tallarico has talked a little bit about when we lose our way in religion, we lose the prophetic voice of religion. And I'm not going to go out there and be like, oh, Tallarico's a prophetic voice. I think it's dangerous to put that on a politician in some ways. But I think he is really working to bring that prophetic voice into the public sphere.
Well, he made a prophetic statement just this last week when he was accused by the current administration of not being qualified to run for Senate because he's a vegetarian, which he's not.
Yeah.
But his prophetic response to that was, tell the president that I was eating barbecue before Ken Paxton's first indictment.
That's right. Yeah. I love how being vegetarian is like an insult in Texas. It's so fun. I mean, I have so many people go, oh, you're a vegetarian, but you eat bacon, right? It's funny.
Bacon is a sacramental food.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I don't know if you were here the Sunday that Ann Johnson was here.
Of course I was. Yeah. She's one of my heroes.
Ann Johnson said that, this was months ago, she said running up to the midterms and the election, that those who tell the politicians what to say, because evidently they don't have original thoughts, they're scripted, are telling them that if the Republicans want to win elections this coming cycle, they have to be anti-gay, anti-trans, anything DEI.
Yeah.
Because that will help get them votes.
Yeah.
So the article in the Times quoted somebody going after Tallarico because he said God is binary. Well, what Tallarico meant by that is that you cannot ascribe a sex to God.
Yeah.
God is neither male nor female. So
I've raised this article in here before, but there's this lovely op-ed from, I believe, the New York Times some time ago, titled God is Transgender. And actually, the Hebrew word for God, Yahweh, is not really a word, it's an anagram. And part of the anagram has been flipped, so it's YHWH, which when spoken says who, he, which means she, he. And so the word for God is actually inclusive of the spectrum of gender.
So when people ask this question, what about when Jesus says, I am the way, no one gets to the Father but by me? That's usually not an open, honest question. An open question is one that leaves space for dialogue. An honest question is one that does not expect the answer from you. It's more open for dialogue. So a not open, not honest question forces somebody into a corner. And if you don't answer it exactly like they want to, then you're in the out camp in that sense.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to address that. Also, I think it reflects biblical ignorance, because no scholar accepts the Gospel of John as a historical, literal newspaper kind of document. It's all mystical, it's all poetic. So Jesus is the way to be for those of us who are in the tradition of being Jesus followers. That's what I would say about that.
Yeah.
But I was wanting to get that out of my system.
Okay. When we said earlier, it's impossible to talk about this without being self-referential for Jesus too.
I can't do any teaching without that. Seriously.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we are our own authorities, and that's the mission here.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you hold it that Christianity means having the correct belief, or that if Christianity is the only way to be saved, whatever that word means, and we'll have to get to that. I'm remembering somebody said that there are a lot of people who are wondering if they're going to be going to heaven when they die, when they don't know what to do on a rainy Sunday afternoon. So being saved is about being free.
Yes.
And not about...
Yeah, we're in such an interesting time religiously, spiritually. We've got a rise of the spiritual but not religious. That's the largest population of religious folks right now, is spiritual but not religious, and evangelicals of all stripes. So kind of an interesting thing. But Christianity itself, to me, seems divided between rigidity, literalism, expansion, mysticism, and indifference. So there's a lot of indifference, I think. I was just driving and watching people go to church over here today. I just looked at all the people walking towards various churches as I drove here. And I'm asking myself, I wonder how many of them actually think through, take in, digest the words, and maybe unpack them. And this, I don't think we can stay in the land of indifference if we want to do narrow gate theology.
I agree with that.
Yeah. And indifference can mean neutrality about justice issues. Indifference can mean pastoral. I preached for everyone, as opposed to I'm preaching for freedom or I'm preaching for justice. So narrow gate theology, I think, actually asks us to be committed in a different way than this kind of general theology.
I think we'll get to this, but what you remind me of is that we don't travel this by ourselves. And the way that many people interpret this teaching from a right of center point of view is it excludes so many other people.
Yeah, that's why I think I used to think that the narrow gate meant rules and doctrine and like not having sex before marriage and not, these kind of like rigid. When I was younger and first being exposed to Christianity, I think in a sort of harmful way, I attached myself to the rules. And I don't want to say that rules aren't important. Again, as a 6 on the Enneagram, I like a certain amount of structure, I like a certain amount of form, but I want to have a lot of room to play inside of that form. And that rigidity didn't work for me when first being introduced to Christianity. So there's this tension between the narrowness and the expansiveness of a thing, and that's what we're holding in narrow gate theology.
Well, I think there are rules.
Yeah. Tell me, what are the rules, sir? Oh, shoot.
Well, if if you're going, and I use this illustration a lot, if you're going to play the piano, or you're an artist.
I am.
If you're going to develop art, you have to know the rules of perspective and depth and color and harmony and all that. Mm-hmm. Unless you're a genius and it just comes to you, you're a savant.
Of course I am. Just kidding.
I should have said unless one is, but the same thing is true about playing a piano or playing racquetball or doing anything. There are some fundamentals, but if you get stuck at that level, you don't ever play.
Yeah. So my mantra, I was a teacher for 14 years in middle school and high school. And I love teenagers. I really do. I'm a weird adult.
That's really weird.
It is, I know. It is really weird. But I every day came in with a lesson plan, which is a structure, which is a set of rules, which is this is where we're going to get by the end of this class. But my mantra kind of became, I have to have a certain amount of form and flexibility. So you go in with the form, right? You go in with the idea, but sometimes a kid's losing his ever-loving you-know-what, and you're like, my form has to change and I have to be flexible inside of this.
Right.
And I think that's a bit what we're talking about.
Right.
There are forms.
By the way, I just give you a biblical historical lesson here, okay?
You never do that.
When you spoke about your love of teenagers, did you know that we now know that when God called Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, Isaac was 12? Because if you'd been a teenager, it wouldn't have been that much of a sacrifice.
He would have been like, take him. Boo!
So I would just say that if it had not been the threat of rain and flooding last night, a huge contingency from St. Paul's would have walked in the Pride Parade last night. There are not a lot of churches in Texas where that was going to happen. But we live in a bubble here at St. Paul's. We live in a bubble here in ordinary life. The stuff that you're hearing right now is not unheard of in most progressive mainline churches all over the country. It's just rare in Texas and in the South, in those areas that lost the battle in 1919 between the modernists and the progressives. And there are these bubbles that come up. Next Sunday, we'll celebrate the Pride event here in this time and space. But I want us to be grateful for what is able to happen here. All right? But I also don't want us to be distracted by the fact that thinking we're that unique. Because in mainline Protestant Christianity, this is the fare of the day. It's just very unusual in Texas. And that's why the New York Times article about is Texas ready for Tallarico's religion really struck me as something, well, yes and no.
Yeah. To me, when I think about kind of going back to what do we mean by the narrow gate and by this sort of the wayless way, there's a big difference between narrow and restrictive. And constricting is not freedom. Constricting is binding. Constricting keeps us from being ourselves. Narrow might go, yeah, let's focus, let's hone in. There's a line that is attributed to James Baldwin, but it's actually nowhere in his writing or in his recording, any recordings of him, but it's kind of in the ethos of James Baldwin, kind of like the sayings of Jesus. We think Jesus probably said this, it's in the ethos of Jesus, but it says, we can disagree and still love each other, unless your disagreement is rooted in my oppression and denial of my humanity and right to exist. Mm-hmm. That's narrow, but not restricting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I'm less tolerant.
Say more.
Oh, I used to think that when people would say some far-right fundamentalist thing, I would say, well, that may work for you. But it doesn't work. If it excludes, if it demeans, if it judges, if it makes anybody less than,
right,
it's not healthy.
So what do you think is this sort of wayless way response to that? It may work for you.
well, it doesn't work for me and it doesn't work for the common good. Yeah.
Yeah. So in talking about this, you know, we're trying to expand narrowness. Again, attention, a paradox.
One of the people that I saw for spiritual direction years ago taught me something really valuable about this. She had children that she got to the point where she didn't want to expose them to her in-laws because her in-laws were really crazy. I mean, they were racist and they said really horrible things. So she would go with her children when the children wanted to visit grandparents and family on that side. And when something came up, like some racist comment, she would just say something like, gee, George, I didn't know you were a racist. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. How'd you become a racist? And it stops it right there.
Yeah.
So I think I would say something like that, you know.
Yeah.
Because I'm old now and I don't have as much at stake. So I've lived a good life, so if somebody calls me, it's all right.
Yeah. 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 You've taught me about this over the years, actually, this concept of emotional judo.
Yeah.
Yeah, where when we respond to something like that, when we're being prophetic, we can say, I hear what you're saying, and that sounds,
right.
I didn't know you were racist. Or you might not mean it this way, but what you're saying sounds X. Yeah.
Judo is being non-defensive, it's being non-rational, and it's being playful in the sense of that, you know, kind of playful.
Yeah, yeah, a little bit of third way type of dialogue.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So. So if it's not a rigid set of beliefs and what is it? You're a 6. You like rules.
I do, but I'm not a phobic 6. I'm a counterphobic 6. So that means I question every single rule that's ever handed to me. And where we land in this, it means I'm a rebellious rule follower. That's right. The hard kind. As we were kind of talking this week, and I think you looked at me like I was crazy, like if I'm actually thinking about this, you got really close to the screen and said, "What did you just say?" But I said, "This reminds me of black holes."
Why? How is that possible?
Well, what we know about black holes is not very much. They're a great mystery in the cosmos, because we can't actually get anything close enough to a black hole to know what happens when matter goes through it. Okay?
Right.
But one possibility, but we've named the parts of a black hole. Okay? There's the event horizon, which is the edge. And as soon as something tips over the event horizon, it gets pulled through in such a way that it is constricted. It becomes, the one theory is that if I were to pass through a black hole, I would become like just this extraordinary spaghetti strand. Okay, I would get stretched to the degree of annihilation.
Is that the origin of string theory?
Maybe. No, but so black holes remain mysterious to us. And again, we only can say we think we know what happens, and then based on what happens to matter around them, that it disappears, that the black hole is an event in the cosmos that nothing can pass through, even light. So we can't see into it. The metaphor here to me is in narrow gate theology. Who among us hasn't known a dark night of the soul? When we can't even see the light coming through, or when we feel compressed, when we feel stretched. You know, I said earlier, I have this thought that everything that happens in the natural world happens in our bodies, and that's a way that our bodies intuit cosmology. Like, we are cosmonauts. We are living in this cosmos. We feel what happens. So by feeling into the black hole, I think we can sort of engage with that narrow gate theology. One other really fun theory, again, just a theory, is that there's another side to a black hole. There's not really, you can't call it another side, but that perhaps on the other side of a black hole, bear with me here, is a white hole. And the white hole is what captures the thing. And from the white hole, new universes are formed. So you go through the compression and you come out different on the other side. So the one possibility is that our own system, solar system, is embedded in a larger black hole. And that possibly, the singularity, when we talk about the singularity, the beginning of time, it's possible that it came through a black hole. This is like amazing to me, because this is really, I don't know. I mean, cosmology is a science, it's a philosophy, it's an art, it's imagination. But it's also, can we feel into it, into our bodies? How do we experience it?
I know that when we were working on this, I had this image that came up that I mentioned to you about my work with our program.
Yeah.
And I won't go into that now, but because we don't have time. But my own personal experience of my own journey is that it's been one of evolving and awakening, because the me that started the journey is certainly not the me that's sitting here.
Yeah.
And I hope it won't be the me that is here next week. That there's an evolution in the whole process of going on about becoming. And I think what happens is, well, there are a number of things that happen, is that we sacrifice our becoming on the altars of tribal beliefs. We certainly sacrifice them on the altars of our addictions, which we have many of our various addictions. So there is nothing that I can say to somebody about what they can do to be.
Right.
But as George put it to me, I can tell you some things that people who are busy being do, and you can try some of those things, but there's no guarantee that if you do those things, you will be as they are being.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, total sense.
So it's like...
Do you want to say it again?
It's like being in recovery. It's like nobody that I know will say, I'm recovered.
Right.
We're in recovery. It's an ongoing process.
Recovery is happening to me in some way.
I'm open to it. I yield to the process, however you want. And there are various models that are used for this.
Yeah.
AA is the most well-known one, but there's one that's growing in Houston, which is Buddhist recovery, called Refuge Recovery. And I think there are like 5 or 7 active Buddhist refuge recovery groups in Houston. And there are other ways, but they all have steps.
Yeah.
And anybody who demeans them has never done them.
So there's a form, but there's flexibility in how you move through the form based on your own journey.
And you don't do it by yourself.
Right, and you don't do it. And yet it is a solo journey.
And yes, that is. It's, as Progoff would say, the solitary work I cannot do alone.
Yeah.
And you would also not find anybody, I think, at least this is my personal experience, who says that they're in recovery by themselves.
Right.
Right. So they have guides and teachers and sponsors and things that keep you on the path.
A community.
A community.
Of belonging.
Yeah.
Who understands the language that you're speaking.
Yeah, and that's hard in our time.
It is really hard. I came to think about sobriety. I think there's many, many ways to be on the way, right? In Sufism, it's the way of love. In Buddhism, I said it was flow. In Christianity, it's, I would say, also love and freedom and justice. And when I think about sobriety, and I've not ever as a person participated in AA or Al-Anon, but this way that was given to me to think about sobriety was actually when my son was struggling. Who knows where he'll land, but right now he's great. And the family therapist kept asking us, "Are you sober about your son?"
What do you mean?
Well, where I came to understand that, Again, I'm a 6. I think that we talked a little bit about tools for the way. I think the Enneagram is a wonderful tool. I'm deep in it. I think it's very mystical when you approach it from not just a heady place, but from an experiential place. So 6s want to fix things. 6s want to make it okay. 6s have a strategy to go in and try and really address the issues. There was more that I thought I could do. If I'm not being a good enough mother, if I could do this differently, if only. But being sober to me became about being present to what is. Mm. And yes, there are steps to walk in that path, but the sobriety to what is, presence to what is, every time I found myself saying, I wish this weren't happening, sobriety is, but it is. You're right here, you're right now, this is where you belong, and this is what is. And the more comfortable I got with that, this is what is.
So let me respond by saying, too, that I think, one of the fastest growing religions, there are 2 really fast growing religions, really fast. Islam is one, Mormonism is one, and to a lesser extent, Eastern religions of Buddhism. And I think the thing that attracts people to those is the rules. This is what you do. Islam means to be submissive.
Yeah.
And in Mormonism, there are strict rules that if you're going to be part of the group, this is what you do. And in Buddhism, there's suffering, there's a reason for suffering, there's an end to suffering, and that end is the Eightfold Path.
Yeah.
And so I think, I don't mean to imply that going through the narrow gate is a moral issue or a rigid issue, but you can't, as Peterson translates it, you just can't saunter in with your hands in your pocket, and it takes diligence.
Yeah.
It takes work.
But it doesn't have to be serious all the time. There's a way in which play, I think this is where I thought as a young person, it's about rules and being serious. It was like very boring, and you don't do this, and you don't do this, and you don't do this. And I just wanted to do it right. And I became more anxious in those times. And so I think one thing as I grow older is learning to also love how play is part of this way. How it can't, you're not a serious person all the time.
Oh, I am.
No, you're not. I had to remind you to whisper just a second ago so not everybody would hear. Yeah. So,
my own spiritual director called me a smart ass. So.
That tracks. You call me that all the time. So, I guess you were my spiritual teacher, so maybe it tracks.
So I have a recommendation to everybody here. This is, if you want to know what the Gospel of John is about, if you want to know what this text is about, go see a movie that's currently out right now called Sheep Detectives. I'm dead serious. It is not a children's movie. It's lighthearted and fun, but the theology in this movie is profound. It's about sheep and shepherds and dying and mystery and all our involvement in that.
Yeah.
So I want to say my version of the narrow gate.
Okay, please.
So, and I got this from Jim Finley. I don't want to think you all think that this is my take on that. But what I did when I was interested in learning about narrow gate theology from Jim Finley, first thing he did, read Eckhart, which I couldn't do. I had to have somebody like Coleman translate it for me and help me understand it. So this is the way that I got what Finley said about the narrow gate. From God's side, now this is a metaphor. There's no literal gate, right?
There's one.
Okay.
Yeah.
It keeps moving.
Yeah.
It keeps moving, going forward. the only thing that can get through the narrow gate is love. This is why it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
So in every tradition, but I'm just going to confine this to the Abrahamic traditions and more specifically to Christianity, God is love.
Mm-hmm.
So if only love can get through the gate, from God's perspective, the gate is as wide as creation.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But from our perspective, the gate is like that big.
Mm-hmm.
Because we want to take so much stuff through other than love.
Yeah. The other thought I have about the narrow gate is that the only thing you can take through is yourself.
That's love.
Yeah, it's not designed for all the things that we're attached to, for our addictions, for our obsessions, it's yourself, and you're really, so there's as many gates as there are people, as there are adventures, as there are possibilities for becoming, and so many want to go around it.
So is there a way
Yeah.
to do that? And I'm saying yes.
Yes. Yeah.
So I want to say what those things
Okay.
are.
Let's talk about
And
it.
then as a rule keeper, you can. I think the first thing you have to do is to have a practice of contemplation.
Mm-hmm.
Not meditation, that's different than contemplation. To learn to rest in what is.
Mm-hmm.
This is the incredibly important aspect of sobriety,
Mm-hmm.
is that if you're not sober, you're not present. I have a colleague who does still drink and who says, on those days when I say to myself, God, I need to get home and have a drink, those are the days I make sure I do not.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's an escape from what is.
Mm-hmm.
And sobriety, one of the ways to talk about that, and contemplation is a way of being sober.
Yeah.
To be just right
Present
here,
to what
right
is.
in
Yeah.
the move at that moment. Another thing I would say is using mystics as guides. You had some that you were mentioning.
Yeah.
Jimmy Patterson, who's not here today, I don't think, but maybe watching online, recommended to me reading Rachel Held Evans.
Yeah, you've talked about her. I haven't read her yet.
So here's
Yeah.
a woman, she's deceased now, very young, but she started out as Southern Methodist and ended up left Episcopalian.
Mm-hmm.
And she writes about her journey about that.
Mm-hmm.
So read somebody else's journey. Read.
Yeah,
about
the
that.
one that I dove into a tiny bit this week was Karen Armstrong's journey from entering the convent at age 17, where she comes out of the Catholic tradition and says, I had no sense of self, no sense of my body, no sense of like who I was in the world. Mm-hmm. And the convent gave her the rules. Mm-hmm. They were so rigid, they even discouraged relationships, friendships between the women in the convent because that was a distraction from God. So for 7 years, as she comes of age, she's devoid of touch, she's devoid of care. You could not tend to another if they needed a Band-Aid. So there was a way in which she had all these rules and she was given the path, but she didn't ever really discover God. Mm-hmm. And she talks about when she got out of the convent in her late 20s, even her father, who had previously been a warm figure for her, she couldn't bear his touch. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there was a loneliness that she went through. And I'm also reminded of one of my favorite lines from Meister Eckhart as you talk, is using the mystics as guides. And we both love Eckhart. You've taken him and have sort of written the words that you read on the page. And it's a wonderful exercise. I tend to draw. I tend to make pictures about these words. But one of my favorite sayings from one of his sermons is, I need never write another sermon if I watch a caterpillar spinning a cocoon.
Right. So it's about being present.
Yeah. Contemplation.
About that.
Yeah.
Now, it's not about achievement,
Mm-hmm.
which is hard in this culture to get to. Mm-hmm. And it's about being aware, and I start this class every Sunday this way. We bring to mind that we abide safely in the heart of sacred mystery, and this sacred mystery seeks to find expression through us. We abide in God, and I want to add to that we abide in God infinitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because there's no resting place. This is an infinite process. We'll finish it when we die, when we drop the body.
And then who knows?
We become clouds.
Yeah. Maybe I'm just going to be the annoying whisper in your ear after I die.
That's what's in sheep detectives. Sheep believe that they become clouds. But my serious point is that God is infinitely present with us, within us, around us, infinitely.
Yeah.
Because we can't get this figured out. And then there's the thing about transformation.
Yeah.
So those four things, I think.
And so to expand on that a little bit, transformation is not about becoming someone else. It's about embracing the self and holding. I keep talking about this tension, the tension of opposites. In Jungian terms, transformation is about learning to hold the tension of opposites within us, within everything.
Right, and we are a part of all whom we have met and everything we go through.
Yeah.
And so we humans want to entertain, and again, this is a Western consumer religious belief, that we can make this journey and not suffer.
Right, yeah.
There's a way, if you just got the right car or the right whatever, get enough Botox or whatever, then you won't suffer.
Right.
And that's horse feathers. I would say bullshit, but you can't say that in church.
So I'm sure that at some point in your theological studies or psychological studies you read William James.
Yes.
Yeah, William James was considered the first American psychologist. And I would say he actually was possibly the first American who walked that line of theology and psychology. And he wrote the book, The Varieties of Religious Experience. I think it's Carl Sagan wrote the kind of parallel to that, which is The Varieties of Scientific Experience. They're wonderful to read together because they're actually both quite mystical and quite paradoxical. But William James says that the four qualities of a mystical experience, so you're talking about sort of the practices we can do, contemplation, study the mystics, learn not to rely on things, but on the process within, on transformation. And he talks about mysticism. He studies, there is a limitation in his study. They are all males. I think they are all of European descent. There might be one who is non-Christian in his study of the varieties of religious experience. But I do believe that his conclusion has some merit, which is mystical experiences have four basic qualities. They are ineffable. They're hard to talk about. They're hard to put words to, and here we are trying. That on its face is kind of funny, you know. Let us tell you about mystical experiences. Let's go watch a butterfly come out of a cocoon, you know. So they're ineffable, they're hard to put words to, they're ephemeral, they're short-lived, they're momentary, they're noetic, and they're passive, meaning they happen to you. You don't go find them. But ironically, as we become more present, they find us more often. Okay? So they, even though, what strikes me is that even though they are ephemeral and they are ineffable, we retain them for a lifetime. So where we can find transformation sometimes is to go revisit, and this is where I find Jungian psychology so helpful. We can go revisit those moments with active imagination, right? We can really engage, and I encourage people in dream work to like pick a part of the dream and talk to it out loud in waking life, draw a picture about it. So in active imagination, we can recall those experiences and constantly learn from them in new ways.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
So we did an experiment today.
Yeah.
We'll wait and see what people think about it.
Yeah, we talked more here.
We talk more to each other than we talk to them. See what that was like for us. It was my idea.
It was. Yeah.
And I had a concern about it.
Yeah, because you like form.
Huh?
Because you like form.
No. That's true, but that was not my concern. My concern was that in our desire to be free and flowing, it would call attention to ourselves.
Right, yeah.
And if there's a takeaway from this entire class today about the narrow gate, getting through the narrow gate does not give you the freedom to say, look what I've done. What it does give you the grace to say is, look what grace has done to me. So no matter where you go this week, no matter what happens, remember this, you carry precious cargo, so watch your step, and we'll see you here next week.